Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about, well, an initiative that I saw online and had to dig in deeper. They created a hashtag opens are dead, and that got my attention, which, hey, that's marketing for you. That's half the battle. So I thought that once I learned more about it, that this was something that our audience would really appreciate learning about. So with no further ado, we've got a great guest with us today, an old friend of mine, Jon, over at the OmniSend team. Jon, would you do us the honor of introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Robert. So Jon Pruitt, I'm the VP of Partnerships over at OmniSend. Robert and I go back, as you said, many, many years now. Prior to being on OmniSend, I was with BigCommerce for a time, helping run their technology partner program. And prior to that, it's been about 8 years over at Bronto, another marketing automation platform where Robert and I first started interacting. So go back some time, and the marketing automation space is something very near and dear to my heart. And obviously, this topic, with the hashtag opens are dead, is something that's definitely fresh and relevant in our minds as folks that are on the marketing side. So looking forward to kind of diving into this a little bit deeper.
Yeah, well, and we appreciate having you today. Everything changes in this space. So you and I got to know each other at different companies way back when. Uh, the agency that I was with doesn't really exist as it did,
hmm
to say the
and
least.
neither does the platform in
That's
which I worked at.
that's
It's
right. I mean,
yeah,
Bronto always seemed like one day there'd be fossils.
yeah,
Somewhere we'll dig them out one day. But
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but I think that kind of leads us into today's topic of, we're looking at a changing landscape for marketers where all sorts of tracking mechanisms, whether it be the cookies or other things, or data that's being provided by some of these platforms is going away. But before we get really deep on that, I love to ask about company histories, how a company got its name. Do you happen to know the story behind how OmniSend got named?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty fun story. I mean, you talk about agency and so forth. So OmniSim actually started off as a digital marketing agency, primarily working with small commerce businesses in Europe. So ultimately, trying to help them drive more revenue online. And what they realized is back in 2013, early 2014, they realized there wasn't a great commerce specific marketing automation platform for small businesses. There's a lot of tools out there. And when we talk marketing automation, and at the time they were really focused on email, and email being the only piece of it. So they started developing this platform. So our two co-founders, which still run the organization today, they were running this marketing platform, or I'm sorry, this marketing agency called Soundless, and they said, "Hey, we think we're onto something here." So they started developing their own platform, and figuring out how can we build tools for small marketers to help them drive more revenue. And in 2014, launched Soundless Commerce. And at the time, again, really focused on email. And after several years, realized like, hey, there's a lot more to driving revenue than just email. And at that time, they decided, hey, it's time that we step up our functionality, and we also think about where we're headed as a brand. About 3.5, 4 years ago, made the conscious decision to rebrand the organization as OmniSend, and at that time, starting to incorporate more omni-channel marketing. So, I think SMS, push notifications, working with things like Google Customer Ad Match or Facebook lookalike audiences. So, really going from just a single point email platform to incorporating the whole omni-channel experience. And that's how we got to where we're at today. So, at the end, they also, while we still focus a lot on small S&B, commerce businesses, we're also working a lot more in kind of the mid market segment as well now. So really empowering a lot of those mid market retailers that don't have a lot of time and resources to do really sophisticated marketing automation with a super easy to use platform.
Interesting. And I'm gonna dive right in from there because
Yeah.
I'm I'm particularly interested, iOS 14, Apple threw a curveball at a lot of marketers in terms of their ability to collect data for all sorts of ads. Facebook put out some major campaigns warning folks running ads that they were going to lose a lot of data, a lot of the targeting ability that they'd had. iOS 15 is what this hashtag opens are dead is all about. What's Apple doing now that's going to make people's lives potentially harder or maybe better? I think we'll sort it out by the time this episode's done.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that piece of it is depends on whom you ask. I mean, there's definitely there's going to be challenges not only for marketers but also consumers that I don't think Apple's really thinking about there. But we can definitely unpack that a little bit more. But really, the premise, of hashtag opens are dead is while while opens are going to become more and more of a challenge, email is very far from being dead, and that's what's really really important to make sure that people walk away with here is, while Apple is going to essentially make it, it's Apple right now has about a 50% market share when it comes to the email client. And I'm not talking, many of us have an Apple, or an iPhone or something, iPad or whatever it may be. And I know me personally, I use the native app, Apple Mail app, even though it's for Gmail accounts and so forth. But really what they're doing is they're going to make it a much bigger challenge for marketers to track the open. So they're essentially going to block that cookie that triggers whenever that open happens. So essentially rendering open rates almost useless to a certain extent. And so that's definitely going to create challenge for marketers. But one of the flip sides I see for us as consumers is it's also going to create challenge if marketers don't adapt appropriately, and they may actually start getting more unwanted email if they're not careful. I was actually reading a article that Litmus put out and updated just this past week actually, and it was talking about how marketers really need to be smart in these days, leading up to this, because if they just continue, if they say, well, if we can't go off our open rates, I'm just going to keep sending email, like it could actually upset consumers quite a bit and create challenge for consumers as well and frustrate them. So I think there's kind of flip sides to both sides of this. It's going to be a challenge to a certain extent for marketers, but it's also going to be a challenge for the consumers as well. But there's definitely pros and cons to all of this, and we can definitely dive a little bit deeper into the strategies and metrics and things we want to start tracking. But short, there's always a positive, there's always a negative of every change like this, and it is a fundamental shift in the market of how we look at email marketing today.
Interesting. So hypothetically, the data that would have come from Apple, you can't count on getting anymore from Apple devices, iPhones and iPads and MacBooks and things, as you mentioned. But you'll still have, for a period of time, at least as long as it's available, data coming from PCs and Linux machines and
Absolutely.
Android devices and whatever else is out there that people are using device-wise to check their mail. So perhaps once this finishes kicking in or what have you, and you get, you run enough data, you get a new baseline. And so where maybe your old open rate was 30% and that was a benchmark, you now get it at 15%. It doesn't help you identify which users are actually opening certain emails in order to send them the best possible follow-up emails or such to really put them in the right buckets. But maybe you keep some baseline data with that. It just, it's a smaller sampling.
Yeah. So one thing that while this isn't going to affect as of today, if you're using the Gmail app on your Apple device, if you're using that Gmail app, you'll still be able to collect that open data. But the challenge is marketers we don't have a great way of knowing which application they're using or whatnot. So essentially, instead of it becoming we change our baseline metrics a little bit, it's almost rendered useless to a certain extent, because we've all seen it. We've all seen it. We're seeing cracking down of data. If Gmail or if Apple's doing this, it's likely that Gmail is going to figure out a way to block this, and Hotmail or whomever else, whatever email clients there are, they're all going to follow suit to some extent. But I think the baseline, as opposed to like lowering what we expect from an open rate, you actually have to think about changing the baseline of what you're reporting on. So thinking about other engagement rates as opposed to open. So clicks, last purchase date, when did they actually sign up for your emails? I mean, those are some of the things that you want to kind of start taking into consideration, knowing that we're moving towards this. And they haven't set the date in stone on when this update is going to be released. We're expecting September, October. But there's some things that you can do ahead of time to start preparing for this that I think is really, really important, because today we still do have, unless someone's opted into that beta, which, it is a smaller beta group, we still have that data today. So it's really smart to think about how you can use that data to start segmenting and cleaning your list in preparation for these bigger changes that are coming later in the year, especially right before Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the holiday season that's coming up.
Yeah. In some ways, I think there are certainly marketers that have probably been looking at some of the data without the right glasses on. They've been looking at opens maybe a little bit too stringently, when there's probably more important data to focus on in terms of user engagement and whether or not you should be following up in certain ways, basically your next actions, because that's the question. Yes, it's nice to know, okay, the email went out, the subject line was good, people wanted to click it and open it. That's certainly useful information to some extent, but that's not really what drives a ton of revenue. That might be okay for branding and what have you, lets you know that people are actually engaging. But in the e-commerce world, we all look at conversion rates and revenue stats and other things much more stringently. What are your thoughts on the best pieces of data that merchants really should be relying more heavily on, especially as this data becomes less available or less effective to track?
Yeah, so I mean that's a great question. When we think about email data specifically, it's looking at, to your point, like there's been a lot of A/B testing off of things like subject line, and oftentimes it's, that is an open rate. You want to, see what subject line gets the highest open rate. Hey, that's kind of out the window at this point. So that's why it becomes even more important to start thinking about metrics like click-through rate. It's, or associating, hey, I have this send, and now I'm starting to track website behavior. So it is, some people have said open rate is a vanity metric. I've heard it for a long time. It there was a correlation. It's the more advanced email's gotten, the more we've relied on, more and more data. But it's really important to think about, those who have a higher engagement rate with you. So it's not always a fun conversation to have, but it's really important to start thinking about those customers who are kind of your loyalists, those ones that have made multiple purchases, those ones who have shown engagement, continue to come back and look at a specific product. It's really, really important to start thinking about how you can start leveraging first party data as well as essentially zero party data. So data in which the consumer gives you. So whether or not, let's say you're a sporting goods retailer, and you want to know what sports Jon Pruitt likes. Is he a football? Does he want? Does he have children that are looking for new football cleats, or does he like, the latest soccer apparel or whatever it is? It's like, offering up that opportunity to start driving more zero party preference data, and then starting to track more like website behavior. I think that's what merchants need to start thinking about. Is it's not always about the, yes, subject line, it gets to the attention. It's a CTA to open the email, and then there's a CTA to click the email, and then there's a CTA on your website to ultimately convert. So You can still do 50-50 tests on subject lines. I think it's still going to be important to test things like that, but it's going to be more important now than ever to start thinking about how you're starting to actually personalize that experience for that individual and try to market to those in which are somewhat engaged with your brand. Thinking about, hey, this person signed up for my emails 2 years ago, but they haven't made a purchase in the past 18 months. Maybe that's not the most engaged person that you actually want to send to. So maybe you put them on a suppression list, or maybe run a re-engagement campaign, or something to see if you can drive some additional interest from them. And if maybe you get a conversion at that point, you deem them okay, they're engaged again. So I think it's just we're removing the first CTA data, but there's still so much you can do. But it's so incredibly important to think about how engaged a consumer is with you and your brand and your products, and really market to those who are kind of raising their hands now. So that's the data in which I think is most important. And honestly, that's the data in which has driven a lot of conversion for our customers and email marketing customers for forever, is trying to interact with those that are showing engagement, showing an affinity for your products.
Yeah. And it's interesting. 'Cause I would think that the click through rate in e-commerce is going to be much more indicative of something of value, because people opening an email, reading it, perusing it, it's good branding, it's okay. But if they're not clicking through to take an action, whether that's to read more content, or to sign up for something, or to buy something, or uh, there's just so much that you're going to learn from that anyway. you know, I'll venture a guess that your core platform at Omnisend probably isn't changing as a result of this. That there may be maybe some of the other stats, instead of opens, will take a bit more prominence in a few spots.
Sure.
But I imagine in terms of the overall functionality, that this is just something where marketers have to, if anything, be pushed to look at the more important stats more consistently. Reporting on opens is going to be more irrelevant than ever, but maybe
Yeah.
not the worst thing for the marketer. I did think it was interesting how you mentioned that for the shopper, sometimes they may not get quite as relevant emails because it's hard to track what they showed interest in quite the same
Mhm.
way. But nonetheless, probably not a paradigm shift within the industry.
Yeah, and kind of going back to that comment right there about them not getting as relevant emails, that's why it's for those who aren't using the first party data or like tracking their website behavior, that's why they've become so incredibly important to do those things. So if you're not, and this isn't a pitch for Omnisend or any platform out there, but you really need to partner with a platform in which can track that data. So understand that Robert's session data is completely different than John's session data, and we're showing interest in different products. But I think that's super super important. But you're right. I mean, our core product isn't changing a ton. Yeah, we've got some pre-built, the recommendations around segments, or or post email follow-ups, and some of those things might be defined today by open rate, but that's okay. We'll make those changes. I think the biggest challenge, to your point, is educating the merchants around why these changes are coming and these challenges. And it's not a time to really get scared. It's a time to just really think about, okay, how can I just get smarter with my marketing and my email marketing? It's email marketing is still going to be one of the cheapest forms of retargeting out there. I mean, it is such an inexpensive channel when you look at the return on it. And if you were basing all of your email marketing based off of open rates today, then you were doing it wrong to begin with. And I hate to say that, but there's so many more things that you can be doing to ultimately drive a much higher return on investment than just simply looking at an open rate.
Absolutely. Email is definitely among the cheapest ways to reach your audience, to keep them engaged. And as long as you're having a good return on that ad spend long term, that it's helping that engagement. I,
Mhm.
I think that brands will keep doing it for a long, long time. Now, I think it's our teams were recently working together on an ebook. I'll share a link to that in the show notes, but it was around core web vitals. And I think it's a similar challenge in that merchants and marketers sometimes have a hard time understanding the why. And if you don't understand the why, it's really hard to get it right. I think that's a lot of what got tackled by all the different teams that participated in that ebook. A lot of great companies that added to the content and really built something strong there. But that's, I think, what probably happens here is that people just hear, well, no, you don't get cookie data here, or you don't get this data there, and it feels like, oh, we've lost something. But really, in a lot of cases, it's an opportunity to do something better. And the companies that are forcing this on us are doing it for a reason. They're listening to the market, and they're delivering what consumers want. And ultimately, while I can't say that that big tech always, we are all the product. We are data, and we're sold to the highest bidder. But I think that it really does enhance the experience. And the last couple of years, just how much e-commerce has grown, and just how pervasive it is within our lives. I think it's working. I think that using data smarter, if that's the right way to say it, has been good for all of us. Your team is also, as part of this hashtag Opens Are Dead initiative, you've stood up a website where you're providing additional information, where you're going to continue to track this and offer helpful recommendations and tips and things. Mm-hmm. Have you seen anything interesting come through that so far? Or is that something that you think you're really going to see a lot more traction, that people should be bookmarking for after Apple makes this release of iOS 15 that's going to really drive this one home?
Yeah, so opensardead.com is the website. Omnisend is powering it, but it's the neat thing about it is it's not just our point of view on this. We're gathering tweets and LinkedIn posts. We're gathering other third party. It's really meant to be a hub to educate the entire industry, and it's not. There's a lot of Omnisend stuff on there, but I think there's a lot of great educational stuff on there now, especially to like how to prepare for this, and kind of the steps that we need to be taking now as marketers to make sure that we're prepared for this change. And if you're not already going in and segmenting your list and saying, okay, show me the people who have opened my emails or haven't opened an email in the last 6 months, you need to start preparing for those things. I mean, there's all kinds of tips and tricks on there on how to prepare, and kind of like some how-to guides. And there's also guides on like the segments and things that you need to start thinking about running ahead of these potential, these changes. Because again, we don't know the exact date on them, but it's really, really important that you get prepped. But I do think, as much as we're trying to educate people, and like yourself having this podcast on this, there's still going to be some people that are caught by surprise, because we, and even in our platform, we're actually advertising this thing of like, hey, look, you need to be prepared. But I guarantee you, it's one of those things. It happens to me sometimes. Our HOA changed policy recently, and I didn't know anything about it until one of our neighbors got a violation. I'm like, what is this all about? And it's like, I go back and look, and they sent out notice after notice after notice, but I just thought it was just more junk mail, like actual physical junk mail from our HOA. And no, it was actually really, really important. So
you don't want to get on the wrong side of a homeowner association. That gets ugly fast.
That's right. That's right. It's very, very true. But no, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I think that as soon as these changes are implemented, there's going to be merchants out there that see just this. The likelihood what's going to happen, and what the testing we've done is, it actually looks like every email is open. So they're going to see their open rates just shoot through the roof eventually. And again, not every consumer out there is using Apple Mail, but over 50% of them are. There's over 50% of the market, the phone market today is iPhone. I mean, it's amazing. So they're going to see this massive jump, and they're going to be calling us or one of our competitors saying, "Hey, what happened here? Oh my God, my open rates are through the roof, but now I'm getting all these spam complaints or something along those lines." It's going to be really, really, really important that we continue as an industry to update that website and
Mhm.
use it as a resource. I invite anyone, whether you're an honest customer, partner, competitor, whomever. I think it's a really, really great resource to continue diving in. I think the traffic, we've seen massive surges in it since we launched it. And I think as soon as all this comes live, it's going to be a great resource for people to continue to educate themselves. And we'll continue to put more tips on there because if you're not preparing today, we want to help you prepare whenever this goes live. So we'll continue to update it and try to educate people as much as we can via that website.
Awesome. And look, from my perspective, tracking what's happening after they open the email and they click through to the site, make sure that regardless of what platform you're using to send your emails, that you're adding the right suffixes. You've got the UTM tracking codes in there, so
Absolutely.
that you're tracking over into Google Analytics and whatever other analytics suites that you're using.
Yep.
You know what those interactions are after they click through to the website, and you're
Mm-hmm.
really commingling some of that data to understand better what's driving what actions or not through your site, and what's really having a positive impact and what's not. Because realistically, if you send out emails that lead to really good engagement, well, chances are that if you just keep sending that sort of material out, in general, you're going to see lift. Of course, that in general, if you're giving people what they're interested in, things that are captivating them, well, they're
Yep.
more likely to enjoy your emails and keep opening and keep clicking and everything else. That I think, like everything else in e-commerce, if you have a good product that people want, that's priced fairly, that ships reasonably, that you check all the boxes to get them to that core product. Your branding is solid, everything else, but the product is really there at the center. It falls into place. I think a lot of the same here. It's just working it all in reverse.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right. And that's, the shift for this is Apple saying, "Hey, we're listening to our customers, and they're tired of being targeted and whatnot." But there's been so many um, surveys run out there that consumers actually, while they say, "Hey, Big Brother's looking over my shoulder" or something like that, I'm going to be curious to see surveys after this to see how many are upset that they're not getting personalized messages and that they're, if the merchants are not doing it correctly, like, and they're just sending, one message to all and, kind of a batch and blast mentality of like, "Hey, I'm going to send these men's products to everybody, even though this person clearly only clicked on women's products on our website." I think there's going to be more complaints after this if people don't start personalizing more. So it's very, very, very important to think about
that's
how to do
really
that.
an interesting concept. I don't want to be targeted, but I also,
Yep.
I don't want to get, junk either. I want to get stuff that applies to me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that meeting in the middle of, if the concept, so the philosophical answer,
Hmm.
and actually being in the weeds and dealing with the real world, it's going to be interesting. Well, John, you've been really generous with your time today. Before we wrap it up, any final thoughts? Anything that we didn't touch on today that you think merchants and marketers and others in the space should really be aware of or be watching out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've already kind of given my plea to people here. If you're not prepared already, or if you haven't started thinking about how to start cleaning your list or building better engagement segments, start now. Absolutely start. If you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, john@omnisend.com. Find me on LinkedIn, John, Jon, Pruitt, Pruitt, on LinkedIn. Or check out opensardead.com. I think that is probably my biggest thing here is prepare while you have an opportunity, and and start thinking about what are the true engagement metrics. Open rate, hey, that's cool, but how many times have they visited my website? How many times they looked at a particular product? What categories are they searching? What preferences are they telling me? Like, start gathering that data now, because it's really, really important. Because whenever this goes live, you don't want to be left stranded and say, "Oh my God, my email revenue just went to the floor." Just prepare ahead of time. That's my biggest plea. Whether you're using Omnisend or using something else, prepare. That is my biggest plea.
Awesome. Well, Jon, thanks so much for joining today. We really appreciate it. And to our listeners, as always, thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more great content like this soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy selling out there.